There is a moment in the birth of the world's most documented figure, a moment witnessed, recorded, and then quietly removed from the story that billions would come to call sacred truth. Not a cave in a stable, not shepherds standing at a distance, but a darkness, sudden, absolute, and alive, a darkness that stopped time. The canonical Gospels tell the seeker that Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem, that there was no room at the inn, that a child was laid in a manger. These fragments are familiar. They are recited from memory. They are painted on cathedral ceilings and carved into the walls of basilicas, built on top of the very ground where it may have happened. But there is another account, older than Matthew, older than Luke, an account that was read in the earliest Christian communities, and then, in the centuries that followed, was stripped from the sacred record. It describes not a manger, but a cave, not a silent night, but a stillness so absolute that birds hung frozen in the air. Midwives summoned, a blinding column of light, a miracle so strange, so dark in its power, that those who compiled the canon could not allow it to stand beside the gentler story they were constructing. That account is called the Protoevangelium of James, the Infancy Gospel of James, and what it records will challenge everything the seeker believes about what happened in that darkness, outside Bethlehem, in the hour the world was supposed to change. Welcome to Bible Secrets, Hidden History. Before we descend into these ancient archives, consider joining our community of seekers by subscribing. If you believe this history deserves to be preserved, that no sacred record should vanish without witness, a simple like helps this truth reach those who still search for it. Chapter 1. The Forbidden Document. The Protoevangelium of James is not a fringe text. It is not the invention of a medieval heretic or a Renaissance forger. It is among the earliest surviving Christian writings outside the canonical Gospels, composed, according to the majority of textual scholars, somewhere between 150 and 180 CE. The oldest manuscript fragment we possess, the Papyrus Bodmer V, dates to the late 3rd or early 4th century. It was found in Egypt. It survived the Great Purges. And yet, when the councils of the 4th and 5th centuries assembled to determine what was scripture and what was silence, this text was placed beyond the boundary. Why? The Protoevangelium does not contradict the canon on small matters. It does not merely add color to a familiar scene. It presents a cosmology of the Nativity, a theological architecture that is fundamentally incompatible with the doctrinal framework the institutional church was constructing. The title Protoevangelium, from the Greek protos, meaning first, and euangelion, meaning good news, identifies this text as a pre-gospel. It claims to record what happened before the events of Matthew and Luke. Its attributed author is James, the brother of the Lord, son of Joseph by a prior marriage. This authorship claim is itself a theological declaration that the witness standing closest to the event has been silenced. The church father Origen knew this text. Clement of Alexandria cited traditions consistent with it. Jerome rejected it, and his rejection, codified in the Latin Vulgate tradition, shaped 500 years of Western biblical canon. What Jerome found so threatening was not a myth. It was a documented account of specific, verifiable strangeness at the moment of the Nativity. Chapter 2. The cave they buried. The canonical Gospels placed the birth of Jesus in a structure commonly translated as a stable, the inference drawn from the manger, the feeding trough in which the infant is laid. Bethlehem, an inn with no vacancy, a detail so familiar it requires no examination. Examine it. The Greek word translated as inn in Luke 2:7 is kataluma, the same word used in Luke 22:11 to describe the upper room of the Last Supper. It does not mean a commercial lodging house. The Greek word for an inn, a public hostel, is pandacheion, used in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Luke chose kataluma deliberately. It means a guest chamber, a private room in a family dwelling. The implication, unspoken in 2,000 years of nativity iconography, is that the family itself had no space, and that Joseph and Mary were turned away from the inner rooms to an outer chamber, or somewhere beyond the walls entirely. The Protoevangelium of James states it plainly. Joseph finds a cave. He leaves Mary there, under the protection of his son James and 2 young men, while he goes to seek a midwife in the region of Bethlehem. A cave, cut into the limestone of the Judean hills. Dark, ancient, precisely the kind of structure that served as both animal shelter and emergency dwelling in the rural landscape of first-century Judea. And the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, constructed by the Emperor Constantine in 326 CE, built atop the site identified by the earliest Christian communities as the birthplace of Jesus, is built not over a stable, but over a grotto, a cave. The tradition the Church suppressed in its texts, it preserved in its stones. Chapter 3. The Stillness of the World. Here is what the canonical record does not contain. Here is what the Protoevangelium of James records as Joseph's own testimony. The words of a man standing in an open field while Mary labors in the cave behind him. Joseph looks up, and the world stops. The birds in the air hang motionless. Workers at a table with bowls raised to their lips are frozen mid-gesture. A flock of sheep stands without moving. A shepherd lifts his staff, and it does not fall. The river ceases its flowing. Time does not merely slow. Time ceases to exist. And then, it returns. The birds scatter, the sheep move, the river runs, and from the cave behind him, a blinding light erupts, so absolute it cannot be looked upon, and gradually, it contracts. And within that contracting light, an infant appears. This is not metaphor. The Protoevangelium presents this as literal event, recorded by an eyewitness standing 50 feet away. Knowledge bombshell. This narrative of cosmic suspension bears striking resonance with imagery from the Book of Enoch, a text explicitly quoted in the canonical Epistle of Jude 1:14-15, confirming its authority within early Jewish and Christian communities. Enoch 14 describes divine presence as a phenomenon of extreme luminosity that arrests natural law, where those who approach the throne of the Ancient of Days encounter an environment in which ordinary physical experience becomes impossible. The Protoevangelium appears to draw on this same cosmological vocabulary, framing the Nativity not as a humble pastoral scene, but as a theophany, a direct, law-suspending, world-halting eruption of the divine into material reality. The gentler story, the silent night, the sleeping world, required this account to disappear. Chapter 4. The Midwife and the Withered Hand. But the darkness does not end with the light. Joseph returns with a midwife, unnamed in most manuscripts, though later tradition calls her Salome. She enters the cave. She sees what has occurred. She declares it a marvel beyond her comprehension. A second woman, also called Salome in the text, demands proof of the miraculous birth. She performs a physical examination of Mary and makes an assertion that this document is explicit about, and the canon is entirely silent upon, that the physical signs of virginity remain intact following the birth itself. It is a claim so anatomically specific, so theologically loaded that it explains in a single passage why this text could never be canonized. And then comes the darkening. For her demand for physical proof, her insistence on tangible verification where faith was required, Salome's hand withers. The text uses the Greek ketaphlage. It is consumed, burned, not merely weakened, destroyed by fire that comes from within. The image of a punishing divine fire consuming those who touch the sacred without reverence has deep roots in the Hebrew tradition. In 2 Samuel 6:6-7, Uzzah reaches out to steady the Ark of the Covenant as it tips on its cart and is struck dead by God before he can complete the gesture. The Hebrew verb is wayakehu, and he struck him. The Ark, the most concentrated point of divine presence in the Hebrew world, could not be touched by ordinary hands without fatal consequence. The Protoevangelium frames the newborn child in precisely the same terms, a locus of divine power so concentrated that unauthorized contact produces immediate physical judgment. Salome's hand is restored only when she cradles the infant in contrition. The fire withdraws, the wound heals. This is the dark miracle the canon refused to record, that the birth of the figure of universal compassion was attended by a moment of devastating sacred violence. Chapter 5. What was removed and why the Church did not suppress the Protoevangelium out of malice toward history. It suppressed it because canon formation is always, at its foundation, a theological argument. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, competing Christian communities were advancing radically different Christologies, different understandings of what Jesus was and when his divine nature had been established. Did divinity enter him at baptism? At conception? Was he always divine, or did he become divine? The Protoevangelium answers this question with a power that neither Matthew nor Luke achieves. Divinity was present at the moment of birth with such overwhelming force that it stopped the physical universe. It burned the hand of a doubter. It produced a light that the human eye could not survive. This was not a theology of the gentle shepherd. This was a theology of the consuming divine fire, the God of Sinai, the God of the Ark, the God of Enoch's terrible throne room, arriving in human flesh and announcing that arrival by temporarily annihilating the laws of nature itself. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, in Antiquities of the Jews, Book 3, Chapter 5, describes the moment Moses emerges from the divine presence on Sinai. His face altered, his proximity to the sacred having physically transformed him. Those around him cannot look directly at him. Josephus frames this as the natural consequence of mortal flesh being exposed to divine intensity. The Protoevangelium's nativity operates on the same principle. Divine arrival is not soft, it is not silent, it is a violent disruption of the natural order, attended by light that blinds, time that stops, and fire that judges. The canon chose the stable. The Protoevangelium preserved the cave, and in the cave, there was no silence. There was only light, and the terrifying implication of what that light meant. Conclusion: the cave beneath the basilica, the Church of the Nativity, still stands in Bethlehem. It is one of the oldest continuously operating churches on earth. Beneath its floor, beneath the mosaics, beneath the altar, there is a staircase, and at the bottom of that staircase, there is a cave. It has been there since before Constantine built his basilica above it. It was there when the earliest Christians marked it as the place. It is there now, a grotto cut in ancient limestone, lit by hanging lamps covered in silk and silver. The building built to celebrate the birth covers a cave. The tradition designed to comfort built itself on top of something older and stranger, and considerably more unsettling. The seeker who stands at the threshold of the Protoevangelium of James is not standing at the entrance to heresy. They are standing at the entrance to the earlier story. The story told before the institutional necessity of reassurance reshaped the Nativity into something the ancient text would not recognize. In that earlier story, a man stood in a field and watched time stop. A light emerged from a cave that no eye could endure. A woman's hand withered when she demanded proof of the sacred. And a child, surrounded by cosmic suspension and divine fire, entered the world not in silence, but in the most terrifying quiet imaginable, the quiet of a universe holding its breath. This is what was removed. This is what was buried under silver and silk and the reassuring warmth of 1,000 painted stables. The cave remembers. If this hidden history compels you, if you believe that what was buried deserves to be brought into the light, subscribe to Bible Secrets, Hidden History. The search is not over. It has barely begun.